Good morning, everyone.
Good morning, Rabbi.
We are learning Mishnah Yishkalim, Parak Ches, Chapter 8, Mishnah Gimel, Mishnah 3. Now, if you were to, as we mentioned before, if you find a utensil and you don't know if it's pure, it's impure, you find the utensil anywhere other than Yerushalayim, you have to assume it's tummy, you have to assume it's impure. Yerushalayim, we said, under most circumstances, you don't have to assume it's impure. But when we say you don't have to assume it's impure, it means that it won't make something else impure. If you want to use it for something that's not consecrated, and you want to make sure it doesn't become, you want to make sure it doesn't become tameh, you can still consider it. You can consider it tar. But if you want to use it for a carbon, you can't rely on that. The rabbinic restriction that if you find the utensil that you have to assume that it's impure will apply in Yerushalayim regarding if you want to use that utensil like a knife in order to slaughter a sacrifice or to cut sacrifice or to cut the meat of a sacrifice. So that's what our Mishnah is going to be discussing. Actually, it's going to be discussing the situations where even regarding using it for a sacrifice, you'd be able to do so. So sakin shenimtzis barba asar. You find a knife. Now, this knife is a knife you use for slaughtering, for shechita. So you find the knife on the 14th of Nisan. The 14th of Nisan is the day you have to slaughter the Karban Pesach. Now, if you go ahead and let's say something is impure. Let's say you have a knife that's impure. It's impure. And you want to use it for something that's pure. You put it in the mikveh, now assuming that it didn't get into contact with a dead body. Assuming that. Now, I don't think this rabbinic restriction goes as far as to say that we have to consider that maybe became impure through a dead body. But the point is that if let's say you find this knife, you find mikveh, it's good to go. However, you want to use that knife again for a carbon, you have to actually have it in the mikveh, and it's got to go one night, and you can use it the night afterwards. You need what's called Harib Shemesh. You need for the sun to set. It's not just not put in the mikveh, you need the sun to set, which is circumstances, for instance, if a Kohen wants to eat truma and he was impure, he's got to be toivel, and then he's got to wait for the night, and then he can eat. So too, here, if you want to use this knife, you have a knife that's impure, you want to use it for anything that's consecrated, you have to be toivel it and then wait for the night. Okay, if so, you have this knife. This knife, you found it on the 14th of Nisan. The assumption is that what's this knife going to be used for? Slaughtering the Karban Pesach. If it's going to be used for the slaughtering of the Karban Pesach, it's got to be pure. Okay? Now, whoever this knife belongs to, he better have made it pure from the day. Better have put in the mikveh yesterday on the 13th of Nisan, because then he can't use it on the 14th of Nisan. So therefore, you find the knife on the 14th of Nisan, shoichet b'miyad. You can use it right away to slaughter. Bishleisha asar. What if you found it on the 13th of Adar, the day before? Now, there's a chance that the guy did put it in the mikveh because he's going to need it the next day. But at the same time, it's possible that he planned on doing it later in the day because he had time today, and he dropped it before he had a chance to do it. So therefore, the Mishnah says, Shaina umatbal. You toivel it again. You put in the mikveh again. Now, this is a very interesting wording. You put in the mikveh again. What do you mean you put in the mikveh again? The consideration is that maybe you never got to the mikveh. So why are you doing it again? Right? That's the whole problem here. The whole consideration is that maybe it fell out. He dropped it before he was toivel it. So you don't say do it again. It's do it. But the answer is that since it's possible he really did toivel it, and we're doing this out of concern that maybe he didn't, we call it do it again if the case was really that he was toivel it. Now, the kofetz. A kofetz is what we call a what do they call it again? A cleaver, a hakmesser, right? That's what you cut the meat with, right? You want to take big pieces of meat, you want to cut it, you want to cut through the bones, you use a cleaver, okay? So the kofetz, you found this cleaver. Now, you're not going to use that cleaver on the Karban Pesach. You could theoretically slaughter the Karban Pesach with it. You could theoretically do that. Theoretically, you could if it's sharp enough, and why not? And we're going to see there is such a possibility of using it for slaughtering, but that's not the typical use. The typical use is to cut meat, to cut bones, right? Now, can you cut the bones in a Karban Pesach?
No.
You certainly can't. So therefore, this kafetz is not meant to be used for the Karban Pesach. If it's not meant to be used for the Karban Pesach, then we have no reason to say that it must have been that he toiveled it the day before and now it's okay. Because because whatever he's going to be using it for, he's not going to be using it for the Karban Pesach, and therefore really has a whole Erev Pesach to be toivel it. And maybe before he actually had a chance to toivel, he dropped it. So therefore we say the kaifetz, we're talking about a cleaver, bein bazeh, whether you find it on the 13th, whether you find it on the 14th, shayna matbil, you have to go ahead and be toivel. You got to put it into the mikvah. Okay, if you want to use it, of course. Now, what if the case is chal arba asal yeis b'Shabbos? Let's say Erev Pesach fell out on Shabbos. Okay, now, and we're talking about a cleaver here, because if we're talking about a knife, we're trying to give the more, the more novel case. So therefore, you find this cleaver on Erev Pesach on the 14th of Nisan, but it's Shabbos. Sheikha b'miyad, you want to use it to slaughter something? You could use it right away. Why? Because everybody knows you can't put in the mikvah on Shabbos, right? You can't be toivel something. If something needs to be immersed in the mikvah, you can't do it on Shabbos. It's considered like fixing it. It's a rabbinic prohibition. It's like fixing it. So therefore, if you found this cleaver on the 14th, but it's Shabbos, so there's no way you can put in the mikvah today. So then when did you put in the mikvah? Yesterday. Right? The assumption is that the person is going to be using it for something. Either he's using it for his Karban Pesach or he's using it for his Karban Chagiga, right? There's a Karban Chagiga you have to bring. You have to bring, one of the obligations when you come for Pesach, Shavuos, and Sukkot is you got to bring what's called the Karban Chagiga. Karban Chagiga you can't bring on Shabbos. Can't bring it on Shabbos. So it's going to come out that at the end of the day, whatever you're going to use this cleaver for, you must have already had tabled it Erev Shabbos on the 13th. And therefore, Sheikha b'miyad, you could slaughter with it right away. Now, v'chamisha asar. Let's say you found, again, this cleaver. You found it, same thing would apply to a knife, but let's say you found it on the 15th. That's when you found it. Again, Sheikha b'miyad. You could check with it right away. In this case, we're not talking about the 14th was Shabbos. The 14th was a regular day. When did you find this cleaver? On the 15th. Okay? The assumption is got to use this cleaver for the Karban Chagiga, for something that's going to be consecrated. He couldn't put into the mikveh today because it's Yantif. It had to be done yesterday. Okay, so therefore we assume it was done yesterday, and it's pure. You can use it right away. Okay, so therefore the point here is that although, again, were you to go ahead and, like we said before, you found it on the 13th, right? You can't assume that it's okay. Even though it's Yerushalayim, you want to use it for a carbon, you can't use it for a carbon. The restriction, the stringency, the Chachamim said, you have to assume that it's impure. That's going to apply when you want to use it for something consecrated, for something sanctified. Our Mishna is telling you exceptions to that rule. When there are cases where you could assume that the knife is pure, because you could assume that it was put in the mikveh, and therefore you'd be able to use it for a sacrifice. Nimtzis kshura lasakin. The last case. We said before, you find the cleaver on Erev Pesach, you have to put it in the mikveh. What if the cleaver was tied to the knife? That's how you found it. They were tied together. Harezu kasakin. Then you consider to give the cleaver the same status as the knife, because the assumption is you need the knife for shechting. That we assumed was tabled, was put in the mikveh on the 13th, usually on the 14th. If they're tied together, we assume that that's the way they have been, and therefore the same way you put the knife into the mikveh, you put the cleaver into the mikveh, and therefore the cleaver would also be considered pure. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you, Rai. Now.